Shalom, Om Shanti, bendiciones and namaste, everyone. It is so good to be back here with you all today. And as our, am I still on, Skip? Yeah. We're on this one or this one? Here we go. Yes, can you all hear me? Since the monthly theme is about circulation, I would just like to ask everybody to close your eyes real quick and just take a deep breath in through your nose and release out your mouth. One more time, deep cleansing breath. And that concludes my talk for today. Thank you all very much. So my title for today is the big T word, based on our national elections that just finished up a couple of weeks ago, and the fact that Larry talked about the election and some politics last week. I figured that it would be my turn to throw my 2 cents in. So I thought it was interesting that he said to think about the fact that every other person that you pass on the street didn't vote the way you did. In fact, every other person that you pass on the street voted for the other person. And I thought that was really interesting. My thoughts over the last few months, and thank goodness Reverend Bonnie's not here today, although I know she'll be watching this. My thoughts over the last few months is, how in the world can we get it right? I just didn't think we could get it right. But if I believe what I think I believe and how the universe works, we really can't get it wrong. So the first big T word that I'm going to talk about today is Trump, our president-elect. But don't worry, the message today is not about him. I think it's really interesting in watching TV, which I try not to do a whole lot of, that there's been a few protests in the streets across the country. And I think it was in Seattle, I heard a story about 112 people that were arrested. The interesting point was not that they were arrested, because this is America, and we should have free speech. We should have the right to assemble. But out of these 112 people that were arrested, 79 of them were not registered to vote and did not vote. So agree with me or not, but if you don't vote, you don't have any right to complain. That's just my map of the world, folks. I think we have to be involved. As students of the New Thought movement, I think it's really important to pay attention, and it's our responsibility to pay attention how we feel, how we think, what we say, what we do. I personally thought the results of the election were going to be completely different. And I was prepared, no matter who won, to give my energy to pray for, and to support energetically whomever won. Because that's what I think we have to do. And I think we have every right to be upset with the process and maybe even who was elected. And we have a choice. How are we going to respond? And I think that's the most important thing here. And as New Thought students, let's remember, as we hear the stories about the protesters and things like that, we all know that what you resist will persist. So what I'm asking each one of us to do is to pivot, see it how we want it to be. See the world as we want it to be. See our country. And I'm asking you to pray for all of our leaders, because they absolutely need it by my map of the world. And the other thing that I tell friends of mine, especially a good friend of mine who's our local congressman in El Paso, don't be against anything, be for something. Put it in the positive. You know, be for something, not against anything. That must be God calling. No, and I knew I put that on silence. I'll call my sister back. When Reverend Bonnie spoke a few weeks ago, she talked about stagnation. She talked about circulation, stagnation, and hoarding, and the fear that there might not be enough now, or there might not be enough in the future. And I know exactly where that fear comes from. Because last year, we had the biggest year that my company had ever had. And it was about this time last year, maybe in October, I started thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen next year? How am I going to create more work? Where's the next project going to come from? And I just started doing that. And I'm like, wait a minute. Just relax. Take a deep breath. Think about what you want to create more of. So immediately had to pivot to what I wanted to create, what I wanted to see. And immediately started giving thanks. That's the other big T word for today, is thanks. We're coming up for this week for Thanksgiving. When I think about circulation, I think about standing in a pool of water and doing my hands this way so I can feel it and let it flow. And you get it all over you and get the benefit of the water, the energy of the water. And as soon as I pick it up and I try to go like this, I don't have it anymore. That's the stagnation. When I go to hoard it, when I go to keep it for myself, I don't have it anymore. So I want to step back into that water. I want to step back into that river, into the flow, the natural being of the abundance and the prosperity that the universe offers us. So to stick with the idea of what I spoke about back in August, which four-letter word are you going to use? Fear or flow? I want to stay in the flow. Reverend Bonnie talked about the fact in part of her message about things being just fine. Well, I think we accept just fine because we really don't know how good it could be. and I think it kind of goes back to, better the hell you know than the heaven you don't. So I think we have to, what did you talk about? In loosening our ideas. I'm going to ask you to loosen your purse strings later. But for right now, just loosening, our thought. Let go, let God. More about circulation and stagnation or hoarding. My dad is a pack rat. He has kept everything because you never know when you might need that. No matter what it is, there is stuff everywhere in his garage. But I think for people that were raised back in the 20s and 30s, or that were raised by people in that generation through the Depression, that there's a reason for that thought pattern. It served them well at that time. Maybe not anymore, but it certainly did at that time. And I think we need to respect that. And I used to hoard things. I used to hang on to every stitch of clothing I ever had. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe this is not the best way to be. So I started clearing things out because the universe abhors a vacuum. So the more I started making room for more things, and not just more clothes. I'm not like Imelda Marcos with 1,000 shoes or anything, but when you start clearing up space, you create room for more things to come into your life, the greater good to come in. And I think that's important. I take yoga a few times a week. And the cleansing breath, the in, the out, the whole thing is focusing on your breath, cleansing your body, having that balance. That's circulation. So I've got to get to the point, even when we have a good year, that I remind myself that Source will always provide. And I was able to keep my mind right enough this last year that Source did provide. Last year was the biggest year we'd ever had. This year is double what last year was. And I guarantee you I would not have been able to create that with the people that I work with had my mindset been one based on fear. So I want to see what I want to create: more happiness, more joy, more love, more prosperity, more abundance, more peace and love in my life. And I've certainly been able to do it on the business aspect. So the next big T that I would talk about is Thanksgiving, and that attitude of gratitude that I think is so important. I told you all a story a couple of years ago. It's probably 3 or 4 years ago. Met a guy at Baylor School. It's where Brenda goes to school now. And we started visiting, and when he found out I was a minister, he said, "Can I ask you a really important question?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "Does God want us to be wealthy?" And we had a phenomenal conversation, and I won't go into all of the details, but what I did share with him, a big chunk of what I shared with him, was a book by Edwene Gaines called The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity. And she teaches that money is a means to an end, not the end itself, because we can't eat money. We can't cuddle with it. It's not going to keep us warm. But simply having money is not the goal. The goal is to use money to do whatever your heart's desire, to do what you need it to do, whatever fulfills your divine purpose. But you see, if we have the vibration of needing money, then we'll attract more needing money, which means we won't have it. This broadcasting station that you have here, this tower, it just sends out and delivers back to you whatever we're sending out. So the key is to be happy now where we are, to be joyful now, to be healthy, to be happy now in this feeling, because it's the feelings that create. You know, and again, I mentioned that the last time I was here, I always thought it was the other way around, that you thought it into process. You got to feel it first. It's that vibration that creates. Money doesn't bring happiness, but happiness can bring money. So being wealthy does not mean we're greedy or bad. Greedy is when I say, I want something for me, but I don't want it for you. That's also when I've used the term sin, which I don't really like, other than it's missing the mark. It's that archery term, when you miss the mark. To me, a sin is when I want something for me and I don't want it for anybody else. But it's okay. It's good to say, I want a lot for me, and you know what? I want even more for you. There's nothing wrong with that. And these are some of the things that I explained to this guy. The more I think that love and money are very similar. They're limitless. And the more we give, the more we have. The more we give away, the more we get. And these things were both created, both love and money, created by God. And we're here to experience them fully and joyfully. So some people still think, by reading a few of the truth books that are out there, that poverty is a virtue. But if poverty is a virtue, why do all of the world's major religions teach about the eradication of poverty? Nowhere have I read in the Bible, thou shalt learn to do without. And you should be here to have less than God in the universe ever wanted you to have. You're just going to have to do without. I haven't come across that. It's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And I believe that that's for us to live a joy-filled life. We are rich with unlimited possibility. So think about these other quotes from the Bible. Jesus said, ask and ye shall receive. He didn't say, make me guess what you want. Fear not, it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Do not be afraid. Lo, I am with you always. Give, and it shall be given to you. As you give, so shall ye receive. So if you want to receive more, we got to give more. Here's a few other scriptures that go along with being prosperous. I have come that you may have life and live it abundantly. And whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. In essence, it's saying whatever you want, whatever you ask for, as long as you ask in his name, that you will get it. It doesn't say as long as it's a good idea. It doesn't say as long as it doesn't seem greedy. It says whatever you ask for in his name, that he will do. So again, God is not glorified by poverty. The universe is not glorified by illness. God is not glorified when we feel guilty or unworthy. God is not glorified when we run around feeling the victim. The universe is glorified when we stand up and acknowledge who we are and claim our birthright. And so who are we? We're children of the living God, of a divine presence. We're spiritual beings in a physical expression, here to experience all the wonder that the universe has to offer to us. More and more and more. So how do we create more wealth? I believe that we create it to the degree that we feel it, think it, say it, and do it. For me, I start with forgiveness first, forgiving myself and anybody else that I perceived has upset me or whatever. Forgiveness for me is key to start with. Then I create that feeling of love and joy in my heart. And then I think about what I want to create. And that positive energy goes out into the universe and returns to me. And so for the next big T word today, and the last T word of today, and the one that you probably thought I would start with, is tithing. Everybody ready to loosen up those purse strings? Wow, it's quiet in here. See, that word freaks people out. That word freaks people out. So let me tell you my understanding of tithing. I've always written a check to wherever I went. And the way I used to think about it, the only reason I wrote it is because I thought I could get a tax break on it or whatever. I wasn't doing it for other reasons, how dare I say the right reasons. If I could write it off on my taxes, why not? But 10 years ago, this last month, it was October of 2006, I met a lady named Edwene Gaines down at Unity in El Paso, and she changed my life. She changed the way I look at energy, and she changed the way I certainly look at tithing. This is what I learned from Edwene and what I did not know before. A tithe is 10% and nothing less. And so I raised my hand. I said, Edwene, is that on the gross or the net? And she said, you cheapskate, it's on the gross. Emerson says you can't outgive God. You can't outgive the universe. So yes, it's on the gross. And I'm like, darn. Okay. The second thing she taught me was that tithe to where you receive your spiritual nourishment. And that doesn't always mean the church or where you are. Edwene tithed to a waitress one time. She was going through a really, really tough time, as I remember the story. And this person was so sweet, so loving, and so kind to her that she made a huge tithe to her, and the waitress didn't want to keep it. And she just said, look, it's my map of the world that I tithe to where I receive my spiritual nourishment. And so please take this. The third thing is that in a tithe, it's very specific money. This is the universe's money. This is God's money. And God's money creates more of what it is given to. So certainly support charities if you are so moved. But please, what she says is do not give your tithe, as I used to think of, as long as I can get a tax break on it. Because we don't want to create more Alzheimer's, more cancer, more homeless shelters. The tithe is a thank you to the universe. So for me, tithing is like forgiveness. And you may find this interesting, but I think it's very selfish. And it's necessary to create more things in your life, to create what you want. So this is where, if you haven't fallen asleep yet, this is where it gets interesting. Larry sent me an email this week. And attached to the email was a link to one of his messages up here and a paper that he had written about tithing. Now, I got this thing, it was probably Thursday or Friday. It's late in the week by the time I got the chance to open this up. And so I'm reading through it. And to say that it upset me would be a mild understatement. I was extremely ticked off when I read this thing and when I watched this. Angry. You all probably can't imagine a redheaded Leo getting angry. Because it made me question what I had already written. And folks, I don't like being questioned. Question me at work, that's one thing, but if I'm up here and I'm volunteering what's in my heart, I do not like being questioned. Circulation. So, two things came to mind as I was going through this. Never argue with the smartest guy in the room. That's Larry. The other thing that came to mind is never argue with an idiot, because before too long, people won't be able to tell the difference. Me playing the role of the idiot. While I often initially disagree with what Larry sends me, because he sends me stuff every once in a while, once I relax, take a deep breath, I had to sleep on this. I got so worked up, I couldn't even finish working on my message. But once I relax and I process and I breathe through it, not once have I ever looked at things the same way. He opens my mind. He forces me to think about what I think I believe. And I'm not looking at him, because if I did, I'd probably start crying, because it's such a wonderful gift that he has. I am so grateful for him, for his intellect, for his genius, for his way of thinking. He questions everything, and that just ticks me off. Really does. But it opens my mind. And thank you, God, that we're all not the same. And given the choice, I would rather be loving and kind than be right. So please always remember that. I'm so grateful to you. Folks, I am not smart enough, nor am I inclined to stand up here and talk to you about theory. It just doesn't work for me. What I share with you is what I'm going through in my life. What has not worked, what has finally delivered me from my self-induced ignorance and pain. That's all I do. That's all I can share with you. That's all I have. Every one of you has your own stories. I'm just the one foolish enough to stand up here and tell you mine. So it reminds me to share with you, as I've shared probably 3 out of the many messages that I've been up here this year on Ernest Holmes, what he says, one of the great difficulties in the New Thought movement is that we are likely to indulge in too much theory and too little practice. As a matter of fact, we only know as much as we can prove by actual demonstration. So for me, tithing is like being grateful and saying thank you to the universe. Just as you would say thank you to a friend who invites you over to dinner. I guarantee you, every single one of you, when you go out here, I came in and I smelled all the wonderful food when I walked in today. I guarantee you, when you get served that, you're going to say thank you. You will be grateful. Those words will probably come out of your mouth. Where are our manners? That's all I'm talking about. Being grateful. That's all. To me, all tithing is just saying thank you. I have made a lot of money in the past when I didn't tithe, and I did okay, but I wasn't aware. I wasn't being grateful. I wasn't giving back to the universe. And when I've been able to do that now, I've done it for the last 10 years. And you know what I did? I tithed on the net. I tithed on the net that first year. And then I looked at the next year and I tithed on the gross and then above the gross. And I didn't have an increase in my salary, and I was always able to make ends meet and had even more money. I don't know how that was, but the more I gave, the more I had. So whether you tithe or not, this is just my truth. And it's my truth right now, and I reserve the right to change it next week if I want to. But it's just my truth right now. So it's totally up to you if you decide to do this. I'm just sharing what works for me. And again, in fact, I beg you, do not take my words at face value. Try it out for yourself. Do this stuff yourself. And I would really love to tell you that I really don't care whether you tithe or not, whether you're prosperous or not, whether you're healthy or not. But that wouldn't be the truth, because I do care. The only reason I stand up here and do this is I feel that I have been called to share what works for me. All I want to do is help alleviate pain and suffering in the stupid things that I do, and I do them on a regular basis. That's all I try to share. This year's theme is a world that works for everyone. But guess what? It works a whole lot better when we're healthier, when we feel better, when we're stronger, we're wiser, we're more abundant, prosperous, affluent. I mean, it's one thing to loan a friend some money if they need, to make ends meet, to make a house payment or whatever. But the way I look at it, I want to have so much energy, I just write a check and pay off the whole mortgage. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a little bit. I'm talking about all of it. I mean, make some huge changes. That's the kind of stuff that I want to do. The scriptural passages that I shared with you a few minutes ago, a lot of folks would think, well, they're taken out of context, or they're this, or they're that. But I'm going to quote the one that Larry loves the most about tithing, and that's in Malachi, chapter 3, verse 10. It says, "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be enough room to receive it." So in this passage, God is offering us all these wonderful gifts. But it's the only place in the Bible I'm aware of that he's calling himself out. Prove me now. Because the Bible just assumes that you're going to believe. It doesn't say, you've got to do this and this and this and this. There's that whole thing like in the beginning, God, you just kind of got to assume that that's the way it is. But in this scripture, it says, prove me now. Prove me now. So I started doing this 10 years ago, took a huge leap of faith. There was even a year in there that I worked and wasn't paid and still tithed. And we still made it. I don't know how we made it, but we still made it. Charles Fillmore says, and wait, I've got to go back to this quote real quick. When I think about, it's what I said earlier, to me, tithing and complaining about lack is like not voting and complaining about the outcome of the election. So if you all grew up in a country like I did, in a Judeo-Christian Western culture like I did, and probably in a church like I did, you were made to feel less than or wrong or unworthy if you didn't tithe. And I'm asking you to suspend that sense of reality. In fact, I would beg you not to believe that anymore. And the only thing I'm asking you to do is just to be grateful and give thanks. You want to give 10%, give 10%. You don't want to give that much? Don't. Give double. Do whatever, in my house we say, you do you, boo. You do you. I'm just talking about being grateful. Tithing is based on a law that cannot fail, and it is the surest way ever found to demonstrate plenty, for it is God's own law in a way of giving. That's what Charles Fillmore says. I look at it as the law of compensation, the law of attraction, the law of gravity. These are all laws that are out there, and our ignorance of them does not preclude us from their effects. But nobody ever really taught us about these other laws that we don't know about, that we haven't been exposed to. And when I was in seminary school, we read a book called The 10 Challenges by Ken Felder. It's a different take on the 10 Commandments. And there's one in there, it's the 8th commandment, as it's written in Leviticus. And it says, you shall not steal, you shall not deal deceitfully or falsely with one another. But what leads up to that, the few verses before that, says, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of the field or gather the gleanings of the harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them room for the poor and the stranger. Felder explains that we have a duty to others to help provide. I never thought by not tithing that I was stealing from anyone. The way I really look at it is if you're not tithing, you're just stealing from yourself. You're not getting the full access to the bounty that the universe wants to offer you. But Felder goes on to explain that this is not only found, in Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and Native American teachings. The Judaism question, should I diminish my income by giving it to the poor, is answered by, these gifts were just given you by their depositor to begin with, meaning God, as a trust to see what you will do with. The Native American writer Bearhart elaborates this thought further by stating, to be replenished, we need to keep emptying ourselves to receive more. In that way, we become vessels, holding up one hand to receive the blessings and then opening up the other so that we become channels to letting these blessings flow into the lives of others. I've learned that if I want to receive more, I need to give first. To tithe God's money is an acknowledgement and a thanks to the universe and the creative energy. All it is a thank you. So I think, what do you have to lose? If you're not manifesting everything that you want right now, why not give it a try? Just give it a shot. At least be open-minded and willing to give it a try. Because in a world that works for everyone, you're happy, you're healthy, you're prosperous beyond your wildest dreams. And with that, I will say, and so it is, and namaste.